I tell you, I am excited to spend a few minutes with you this morning talking about this topic. I'm the managing partner of a law firm, and I have a couple of decades left of practice, so this is particularly important to me. I think it should be important to all of us. I thought I'd start off with looking at the past. How has the legal industry changed in the last 70 years? And then we'll start talking about some trends, things that have already developed. And really what I hope is people take away some ideas for opportunities that exist given the current legal climate and what we expect to see in the next 5 to 10 years. So we'll start with the last 70 years. The legal world has changed dramatically. We've gone from 220,000 lawyers in 1950 to 1.3 million lawyers in the United States. We have seen the ratio of lawyers to the population go from 1 to approximately 700 people to 1 to 250 folks. So we have increased competition, absolutely, within the legal space. The largest law firm in 1950 was in New York City. It had 125 attorneys. Now Baker McKenzie is well over 4,000 lawyers, and it's an international firm. To attend Harvard Law School in 1950, $1,250. Tuition now, over $60,000, well over $60,000. And the one graphic that's not up there, but I think is particularly important in 2018 is, most of us know, that at the big firms this year they decided to increase first-year associate compensation to $190,000. So what does this mean? We have increased competition and we have increased cost of doing business. So, you couple that with some catalysts for change, the 2008 recession that led to clients really asking for more for less, which is understandable. Internally, clients were being asked to do more, take on more responsibility for the same amount of money, and they wanted that same thought process or their lawyers to mirror that. And then we have technology that's come in and in the last, let's say, 10 years really changed the way we practice. Think about the number of emails we all received yesterday in one day, and the way that we transmit information to one another and the demand for that information immediately. It's, if an email goes 2 hours without being responded to, is there a problem? Your client wants to know, where are you? How can I get the information? So we all know that this pace of change is increasing. 70% of law firms agree it's increasing. So what are we going to do about it? How are we doing? Well, I put on here it's an uphill battle. I didn't want to be too negative on a Saturday morning. But when you see that 95% of law firms believe they are not fully prepared to keep pace with the change that's occurring, that's a problem. Perhaps more problematic than that is 90% of clients believe that law firms aren't serious about keeping pace with the change that's coming. And that's probably true. Law firms are generally resistant to change. The last bullet point here is 70% of partners resist change no matter what. They just don't like it. They know it has to happen, but you know what? If it worked in 2017, it'll work in 2018. If it works in 2018, it'll work in 2019. But what we know is that's not true. We have to evolve. But only 19% of firms are looking at re-engineering their processes with respect to litigation or transactional work. So law firms aren't really keeping up with the change that's occurring, despite understanding that more work is moving in-house. In-house lawyers are much more sophisticated. The departments are growing, and technology is allowing in-house departments to do work that they would, in the past, farm out to lawyers. In fact, of the 250 or so law firms that responded to Altman-Weil, of AmLaw 500 law firms, only 40% of those law firms had revenue growth in each of the past 3 years. That means 60% did not experience revenue growth in one of the last 3 years, in a time when we all believe that the economy is doing well. Yet, 63% of law firms say, we're not changing our business because clients aren't asking for it. Well, I think it's pretty clear if 60% of firms aren't experiencing revenue growth, business is moving away in-house. Clients are asking for it, just implicitly. It's there. They're saying, can you help us in a different way? Can you be more efficient? Can you use technology? Can you keep up with the change? So the questions become, what change? All right, you've told me all the negative things. What can we do? Because I do believe there's opportunity. And one of the ways to look at where we are and where we're going in the next 10 years and beyond, you can look to a book called Tomorrow's Lawyers by Richard Susskind. It's published in 2013. And he had an idea, and the idea was to look at litigation or transactional work in a different way. And that is determine who is the best person to perform the work, where should the work be performed, and how. He said, when you talk about litigation, what you're really looking at is 8 categories in any type of litigation. You can break it down into document review, legal research, electronic discovery, strategy, negotiation, advocacy. And in his mind, he said, the theory is only the people who are uniquely qualified to do a task should be doing that task. That is, first chair partner should only do the task that they are uniquely qualified to do. If there's someone else who can do that task, then it should be pushed to that person. And not only that, he said you have to look at sourcing. We have a great array of sources for information and work nowadays that did not always exist. We have relocating. That is, can you take a portion of the law firm and put it in an area, relocate it to an area with a lower cost, where attorneys aren't as expensive, where the back office functions can be performed for a lesser amount, thereby allowing you to pass along some of those savings to your clients. Offshoring, obviously sending work overseas. Outsourcing, we're already seeing that. We have several sponsors here who engage in outsourcing for us, whether it's nurse consultants, data management, document review. Home sourcing, I think, is something that's vastly underutilized. Those are folks who are at home, who have the skills, the ability, but for the moment are taken out of the legal market because they can't make it to an office every day. So, according to Mr. Susskind, the key is decomposing litigation, looking at these sourcing options, and then marrying the two, and so that you get the best product. The product's still got to be the very best, but it's in a more cost-effective manner. That is document review. Is it better off on a case-by-case basis to outsource it or do it the way it was traditionally done, which is get the associates to review the documents, sometimes put them in a room with computer screens and go through document after document. And the same is true with respect to legal research. Project management, which we'll talk a lot about in a minute, litigation support, and so on, until you get to the items that the partners and the attorneys are uniquely qualified to perform. Strategy, negotiation, advocacy, trial work. So according to Mr. Susskind, and I think there's some truth to this, we're already seeing it again with outsourcing, there's going to be a change in the legal industry where we start looking at the different components of these litigation matters and really take a moment to figure out what's the best way to tackle these components for each case. Again, here you can see that firms are already using part-time lawyers, contract lawyers, staff lawyers, and outsourcing legal work. And I suggest to you that I think these numbers will increase over the years as firms are get better at project management. This is something I ran across that I thought was common sense. That is, firms that differentiate themselves or have a differentiator will be successful in the next 10 years and beyond. I thought, well, that makes sense. But of the 250 or so law firms that are within the top 500 law firms in the United States, only 50% of those law firms that responded believed that they had a differentiator. That was staggering to me. I thought all law firms would believe that they had something that was unique or different, that their clients would want to hire them for this specific reason. I think there's opportunity here after looking at some of the data and materials and preparing for this speech. I mean, certainly firms can differentiate themselves in the old-fashioned way, right? I mean, you can have a certain practice area that appeals to a client, an expertise, a geographic footprint, the size of your law firm. Sometimes that's something that sells. But I think there are some new differentiators that are available to firms if they're willing to engage and to look beyond these traditional differentiators. Two that I believe could be a true differentiator are the ones that deal with access to billing and access to a file, which in my mind, I think of transparency. And that is firms that are completely transparent with their clients are able to deliver information immediately, whether it's billing or file materials. I mean, we oftentimes hear from in-house lawyers who say, it is critically important that the law firm stick with their budget, that I have some certainty with respect to my legal spend. Yet, with respect to billing, it's a dinosaur of some sorts that time can be billed, and it's 60 days before the client actually gets the bill and understands how much has been incurred and where they stand with respect to a budget on a matter. So I think there's got to be some better transparency there, or relaying information in a timely manner. And I believe clients would value that kind of differentiator. Metrics, of course, those are, that's nothing new, but I'm not so sure how many firms use that to their advantage. That is, how quickly you close a case, what the average spend is. Obviously, paperless, alternative fee arrangements. After I sent this PowerPoint in, the GC of Delta was interviewed in Atlanta, and an article came out, and he mentioned the fact that, he hires some of the best law firms in Georgia. He enjoys working with them. He has several legal matters where the legal fees are over $5 million. They're substantial, they're complex, all these kinds of things. He says, but none of these law firms have ever come to me and suggested that they work for me on an alternative fee basis. And he says, I would really like for that to happen. I believe, as the GC of Delta, that firms that have been doing this work for decades should be in a position to be able to quote this work differently. They should be able to come to me and tell me what they expect in terms of fees for a matter at the very beginning, at the inception. And so it was really strange. A week later, a couple folks from King & Spalding went out on their own, created a boutique, and their goal is to use alternative fee arrangements 100% of the time. And I thought, well, that's pretty good timing. Maybe they'll get some Delta work. So there are other differentiators, I think, that we can use. Obviously, alternative sourcing, emerging practice areas, project management, and innovation summits with clients. And we've all probably heard about, meeting with your clients, talking with your clients about, how you're doing, and maybe asking them questions about, how can we help you better? I mean, what are we doing that we can improve upon? But perhaps an innovation summit that deals with some of these things. How do you feel like we're doing with respect to transparency? Do you have enough access to your file? Would you like an extranet or a portal of some sort where you can have real-time access? How are we doing with respect to billing? Would you like that information as compared to budget more frequently? And how can we get you that information? Legal process management. This is something that I believe is critical. I mean, we see that there's a difference in terms of ratio of lawyer to individuals, and I think that makes sense. The complexity of legal matters is far greater than it used to be. The amount of regulation that we have to deal with, the evolving nature of what we do is significant. But lawyers aren't taught in terms of how to manage the process and manage the people. And I think there is room there. I believe 40% of law firms are now training their lawyers on legal process management to improve upon how we manage cases. The more complex they get, the more people we have involved, whether it be experts, consultants, in-house personnel, and then on the flip side, documents. How to manage documents in e-discovery. There's got to be some room for lawyers to improve in the use of technology. This is not something that I guess many of us thought about in law school, but given the size of the cases that we're handling nowadays, it makes sense. And I think this is part of the sourcing issue. How are we breaking down a litigation matter and who's being assigned to handle what task? And is it the most efficient and effective manner in which the matter can be handled? And that's what legal process management is aimed at addressing. The last thing is artificial intelligence. If Israel and South Korea can build robots to make decisions with regard to firing on individuals and killing folks, I suspect artificial intelligence can handle some of our legal matters. And truth be told, it already does. You can Google a substantial amount of information. It's at your fingertips. With respect to document review, identifying relevant documents that exist, it's been established time and again that computers do it better than humans. It's more reliable. So artificial intelligence is coming, and it's how do we get out in front of that? There is going to be a commoditization of much of what all of us do. And so are we going to be on the front end? Will we recognize that or not and be left behind? So at the end of the day, this is the takeaway that I read, and I thought, well, that makes a little bit of sense. Innovative and differentiated firms will succeed, will outperform those that aren't. And the good news for us is that only 38% of firms are engaged in experiments to test innovative ideas. So there's opportunity there. It's clear that for the firms that are willing to engage in trying something new, to be innovative, to keep pace with change, you will absolutely be in the minority and ahead of most others. So, thank you.